Dear sisters,
kedves testvérek, Isten hozott vissza a pléniumban. Majd 2 oldalnyi kérdés jött be Tibornak. Az első kérdés, Magyarországon hány cég használja ezt a keresztény etikát? Ezt szeretnék tudni. Hány ember dolgozik a közjóért?
It's like asking how many Christians are.
Körülbelül olyan kérdés, mint hogy hány keresztény van itt. Tehát ez egy több rétegű, több szinten jelenik meg, és azon múlik, hogy hol húzod meg a határt. Vannak emberek, akik cégekben, akik dedikáltak ez nézőpontban, és nyíltan megvallják, hogy ők így gondolkoznak, és mások, akik...
And there are others which are involved, and for example, the idea, a company not just having a mission and an activity, but having a purpose, which means it's not just we are not just here to make profit, but to have a higher level purpose. That's now I would even say a fashion, and more companies include their reports and statements. And also, servant leadership is a terminology which is used and practiced. But again, it's difficult to say that there are 455 companies like this. It's an idea which is impacting people. We have, for example, for impact investment, we created an association 3 or 4 years ago, which means everybody can become a member who at least put 10% of his assets and value into companies which are impact oriented. We are a couple of maybe 15 member company or association, but our aim is to spread the idea and to influence more and more the people. As it is with most of these ideas in Western Europe and in other regions, it's more, or it started earlier, and gradually it comes over and has an influence in our region as well.
Thank you so much. And a similar question from our group, that how many other, maybe in whole Europe or in the world, what do you know that how well known and accepted is this kind of approach to the economical situation or running businesses? Because you talked about your own business, what you have, and from the presentation we understand that in many places they talk about this kind of approach, but indeed are there many companies like this around the world? Because what we see that in many countries there is a immense poverty, and there are some people who get very rich, or some countries get very rich and some countries get even poorer. So this approach would be very important, but how can we hope that this really will spread around the world?
If we split the companies, then we can split it according to the ownership. Those companies who have one or a few definite owners, persons who really invested and started the company, they have a much broader freedom of action than those companies which we know, which are the big ones, and we are on the stock exchange, and which have they have much more power and are much stronger, but their freedom of action is on a much lower level, because the name of the game for them is return, profit, and so on. And before you think that those companies are owned by enemies and bad people, it's not the case. We here in this circle, and as I see, we are close to 100 people. Most of us have private insurance or private pension plan and so on. This money, which we invest or we offer and we give to these organizations invest it into companies who are on the stock exchange with the expectation to have a higher return than the ratio, the interest rate at the bank. So the situation is that all of us here have indirectly investments in those companies from whom we expect nothing else than just profit generation. And then there's the other group, family businesses basically, or private person-owned businesses or private equity companies, where the owner really can decide and can say, and this is what I try to show on this picture with the different sorts and segmentation of companies, where he can choose to do something, let's say, with a lower return expectation than the average market return. So let's say normally you would expect 10%. Now I say it's a nice thing. Okay, I expect only 5%, or no return not at all, or as in my case where I said, okay, this company, this sunflower company is a kind of a special way of a donation from my side. I don't want to see returns, and I don't even want to see the capital invested. Instead of giving a donation, I started to invest in something which is sustainable, which is growing, and from the amount I could have supported, let's say, 3, 4, 5 families who would remain in a dependent situation. As you heard, the company is sustainable and can give work to more than 100 people. So there's a multiplier factor, and it's much more sustainable, and the people work for their own existence. And that's why I think the future is more and more and this is what Pope Francis always states, that we should think about how to give jobs to the people, not how to solve today's problem for them, and then tomorrow we have to solve the problem of tomorrow and so on, but how to create the economy and switch the economy into a situation where the owners and business leaders are motivated to provide jobs for those who need them very essentially and existentially.
Thank you very much for this answer. And it sounds like somehow the word of profit and this word or businesses of sustainable work and businesses that work more for the common good, at some point they still meet or they depend on each other, if I understand well. So then the question is that if our world is so globalized that everything is connected with everything else, and one company is affected by so many other things, how can one company to keep their work, their functioning within this ethically okay or even spiritually well-funded realm? So how can they still stay ethically and spiritually okay if they are so much interconnected with so many other things that where in the economy some other businesses don't care about, is only about their profit?
It's right that just the fact that the company or the owner of the company or the employees of the company would like to have a different culture and would like to act according to their faith, that's not enough. You have to fulfill the requirements of the market, the business rules and so on. And sometimes it's not easy. But again, it's the same with a private person. So to be a Christian in today's world, whether you are young or old or poor or rich, it's very difficult, and you have to adapt partly to the society, and partly you shouldn't fully adapt, because otherwise you are part of this world. And this was the call of Jesus 2000 years ago. You are part of the world, but you should be different, but you shouldn't create an isolated ghetto or island. You have to have an impact on the society, whether it's salt or light and so on, whether it's business, whether it's politics. And I think this is our personal mission and challenge, how to cope with the society, with the rest of the world, while not giving up our ethics, our faith, our values, our health, our spiritual wellness, as it's called now. And I think that's why it's very important not to do it alone, whether it's a person, whether it's a company, alone. A lonely fighter always loses. At the end of the day, you can only lose. If you are embedded into a communion, whether it's a movement, whether it's a network of companies or a club of, let's say, Christian business leaders, and so on, then you share the ideas, you get new insights, you help each other. Again, as Jesus started with the 12 disciples, Jesus alone couldn't have achieved what is Christianity today. He needed those 12 and 72 and 500 and so on people to follow him, and to have it as a circle and not as lonely fighters doing what they want or what they think the best is alone.
Thank you. And I think this, what you are just mentioning, that we cannot fight alone. So one of the questions is connected about our responsibility in the Catholic Church, in the church. And as we know, the Catholic Church has 1 billion Christians, at least in the statistics. So we are a big crowd, we could say that. But the question is that many people, many participants or members of the church still don't take their own responsibility. They just want to receive services from the church, but they don't want to put their part into it. But on the other side of the coin also, that what can we do that the leaders of the church also would really not only talk about servant leadership, but would become persons who are practicing servant leadership. We can pray for them, but what else? What else can we do?
I think it's a big change that the whole idea of leadership, management, business, economy has become a topic for the Pope, for the priests, for such conferences like this one, and not something which is out of our scope. The Catholic social teaching, which started in 1893, so more than 100 or about 130 years ago, was a great step to not just to speak about the spiritual aspects, but to have guidelines for the workers, for the employees, for the leaders, for the owners, for the trade unions, and so on. If you read the Caritas in Veritate encyclical letter, there are a lot of things about bioethical issues, about trade union activities, about governance of countries and worlds. So I think the key message since the Second Vatican Synod is that first of all, the Church is not the organization of the paid priests and so on. We all together are the Church. And secondly, our Christian life is not reduced to a spiritual action. And as you mentioned, sometimes it's a kind of a spiritual service. We in our 24 hours of a day and 7 days a week, we are Christians. And the church has a message for all the 24 hours and for all the 7 days. And this message and these guidelines are rooted in what Jesus told us, has been developed, fine-tuned, put together as a system. And of course, everybody in every situation has to take into consideration many aspects. So it's not an easy one to make all these little decisions and the big decisions we have to make. But at least we know that we are all members of the church, and all the actions we do belong to the topic of spirituality and our faith, and to the practicing of our faith.
Thank you. Our next question is, you said that every economic decision has moral consequences, and one group would like to ask you to explain it a little bit in a deeper level. What does it mean?
If we speak about science, about, let's say, mathematics, then it's 2 by 2 are 4. Whether you are Christian or Muslim or non-believer, it's the same. If you come to the world of social sciences and to the world of business economy, it's different, because every decision is not just an automatic decision. You have certain dimensions you have to think about. You have to weight these dimensions, and finally you got to this decision, which is based on what kind of dimensions you took into account and what the weights were. And this is again depending on your value system. And when I mentioned that, not me, but the Pope as well, or the Pope originally, I quoted him, that every decision, business decision, for example, has moral consequences. It means if we think about, for example, let's say about a company size of employment, even if my heart is very big, if I can feed and create a business for 100 people, I cannot hire 200 or 300 because it's not sustainable. And on the other hand, if I can manage to keep alive a company with 100 disadvantaged people, then I shouldn't do it just for 10, because then I haven't followed my mission. So our responsibility is very complex, because we cannot change the world, but we have to do what we can do on our level. And I think subsidiarity is also in this respect very important, to acknowledge that, and again also that's why we need communion with others, that I can do certain things on my level, together with others we can do even more, and with the worldwide network we can do further actions. And the fact that the Pope would like to have a contact with the World Economic Forum and with the UN and with the governments and with the World Bank presidents and so on, shows that we are not just judging the world, but following the principle of the See, Judge, Act. That means we see what the situation is, we evaluate, we judge, and we also try to act as far as we can. And the individual, on an individual level, we can do certain things, and as a church we can do other things, like as I mentioned in my presentation.
Thank you. It still might be difficult to get leaders in a company or in the church to embrace this vision of servant leadership. But still, when there's a question, so how can a company introduce this new model of leadership, which also would bring to the employees changes in their lives, because it is not the usual model that we grew up with and we are accustomed with. So when someone wants to introduce this new model of leadership, it will be, for a while, it will be difficult or unusual for everybody. So how can we start to introduce this? In the company, maybe also somehow in the church.
Gradually. So it's not something from Monday on, we will have a different culture, different approach, and different new way of leadership. And it depends on the leader. So for example, if you take the item of let's say, respect of the person, respect of the individual. We already have a lot of, even by the law, equal opportunity, for example, and so on, are the translations into practice of that. You can misuse, of course, all these guidelines, but if you want to live with it, it's not so terribly new. On the other hand, those who lead a team, a company, or just a group can start with, the first thing is the change in the mind. Again, do I see numbers and resources and capacities, or do I see you and you and you, and I know you have a problem with your sickness in the family, and the other one would like to learn more but has no chances, and so on. So do we respect each other in the full context, as we said, the whole man, or are we only interested in the physical service you can provide? There was a famous story which was said by Ford, Henry Ford, who made the standardization and the mass production, and he a little bit cynically said that I have the problem that whenever I ask for 2 hands, a brain is coming with it as well. So this approach shows that what I need are 2 hands to do the screws, and I don't care about the rest of your body even, and especially not about your personality. And when we start to, for example, to introduce caring, to care about the other person, which is also needed by the economic drivers, because these days the value which creates a company and products and services are not based on physical things. It's based on intellectual creativity, which requires motivation. So with slaves, you cannot achieve a result as a software company. Or you need people who are devoted, who are motivated, who want to achieve a success for the company and within the company for themselves as well. And for this motivation, they need to feel that they are respected, they are important, they can have their ideas, they have an influence on the decisions, they have team buildings, for example, to bring them together into a communion, to cross-fertilize each other with ideas and inspire each other. So I think many of these issues are already in practice, not based in this system I described, but merely as a tool to increase efficiency and to increase profitability. The difference is that we want to do it consciously and systematically. And step by step, I think the society realizes that we need each other. Like, for example, now with the COVID, if the first wave was to have vaccine for the rich countries because they can pay for it. And now the world realized if we don't give vaccines in some way for the poor nations in Africa, then there will be another wave, this fourth and fifth. We are one global, there is one globe. So we as it's in the Caritas in Veritate, we are in this global village, we are neighbors, and either we also become brothers and sisters, or we just sit next to each other and try to rescue ourselves, for example, in the case of COVID, without thinking of the others. And sooner or later, we will realize it doesn't have an end. It doesn't give a solution. So I think purpose for the company is something which is motivation for all the employees. If especially a young person joins a company and feels misused and they only need my hands, and we are all here only to provide a dividend payment at the end of the year, the young generation will leave the company and will look for another one or create their own social company or a startup or whatever. And therefore, the companies have to take care about these ideas, and don't forget that the companies and the leaders, they are also human beings. They also have families. They would like their children being proud of their parents, and try to bridge this gap. And as I said, the highest level of freedom are with the companies which are owned directly by private persons, which have an owner with a face, with an identity, and not a stock exchange companies with shares which are owned by organizations where there are employees, and behind them are again pension funds and other organizations, and there are no faces and there are no responsibilities. And that's why I think what we are speaking about here is more relevant for the family businesses, which are usually smaller ones, and less can we expect a change at Coca-Cola or McDonald's or whatever. Although even on that level, we see that I can see a lot of changes, a lot of positive improvements, because simply they have to cope with it. Otherwise, they lose their customers. If they don't protect the environment, they lose the customers. If they don't motivate the employees, the most talented people would leave the companies. So just as a protection of their original scope and goals, they have to change. And the idea of Michael Porter, the creating shared value, is also a kind of a compromise solution of finding a solution for being useful for the society while still being useful for the owners as well. It's a long procedure, and we shouldn't expect the results from the biggest companies. We can much more expect from the small companies. By the way, it's the same with donations. People think that the biggest donations come from the biggest companies. In absolute terms, of course, but if you compare, and I can tell it even for Hungary, if you compare the amount of donations given by small companies compared to their revenue or profit, and you compare it with the major big multinationals, you will see that the ratio is much higher. And the same with private people. I mean, if you go to India, which is a poor country, the poor people share their wealth and give money and so on to those who are even poorer. And it's not the richest who would help the poorest people. But I think we shouldn't look at others. We have to focus on our own task and on our present moment and our capabilities. And it's not the big companies and not the big leaders. As I said, a project team of a foundation without big monies, without big organization, also can be led according to the servant leadership model, or can be managed as on a command and control system. And it can be even within the church. I think in the church the temptation is even higher, because there is still a sometimes very rigid hierarchy level. We got used to follow instructions and not to ask questions. So it's also a slowly changing approach, where we, I mean the lay people, for example, have more and more rights or impacts or responsibilities as well. As here today, that I'm an absolutely lay person and I got invited, I don't think 50 or 100 years ago that would have been the case.
Thank you very much for this very detailed answer. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this fact that that's indeed now the big companies also started to recognize that they have to take care of their workers, not only because it would be nice, but because it is more profitable for them. So that's a good thing. But somehow I feel this, that still, if they take care of their workers or try to provide better conditions or better salary or maybe a little more influence in the decision making, if they do it still to have a better profit, so they are doing just for the sake of the profit. But what I feel, what you were presenting, this alternative that comes from the heart as well, and this too, that maybe that those decisions that come strictly from financial point of view, and decisions that come from also from the heart or from the ethical part of our being, it also tells me that somehow we need conversion. So to really make good decisions and commit ourselves to run businesses in an ethical or a religious way, we need a conversion of heart. And with this, we also get to the next question. One group says that what are those virtues that are necessary to practice this ethical or business management that is focused more on the common good, that this whole thing can become a culture. So it's not just certain groups or certain movements or small businesses, but how it can become culture. It starts with our own conversion and starts with the individuals practicing certain virtues. So what do you think, what are those virtues that people should strive for?
For the as a reaction to the first part of your thoughts, I think that there is a kind of a procedure of all these ideas. The spiritual idea was clear already, let's say, if we go back to Jesus 2000 years ago. The academic followed with a long delay. For example, just the fact that human dignity, it was clear from a theologian point of view that everybody has a human dignity, each individual on the globe. The philosophers needed several hundred or thousand years to reach this status, although theology told it already. I mean, even the Jewish theology, so it means 3,000 years ago already, it was clear that humans are more than animals and anything else, and therefore there is a kind of dignity. So spiritual, clean and clear ideas, then somehow it comes into the academic world, as science, as new ideas, as books, and then gradually it comes into the practice. And of course the practice is the proof, and that's the goal. I think if we, for example, think about corporate social responsibility, I mean, to be responsible also as a company and toward the society, again, from theological point of view, it was clear always. In the academic, it showed up in the early 50s. The first article about corporate social responsibility appeared in 1953. And to become corporate, I mean, the whole CSR activities and the whole hype of CSR happened maybe in Western Europe and in the States maybe 30 years ago, in the 90s, 80s, 90s. And in our region, it appeared and showed up and became a hype, let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So from the science to the practice, it needed a few decades. I think it's the same with all the rest, like we discussed today. And as more and more people have their scientific approach, which gets into the practice through trainings, lectures, business schools, and so on, gradually the new generation learns it and starts to practice it. As you said, Agnes, partly only as a trick, as a tool to increase profit. And you can ask your employees, how are you today? On a way which is, I learned it at the training, that this is how I should motivate my colleagues. So every morning I ask everybody, but I don't listen to the answer and because I'm in a hurry, but I can check it and it's over, or it can come from the heart. And if I don't ask, how are you? But I say, oh, somehow today I see you are sad or tired or something must happen in your life. Can I do something for you? That's more than just asking the standard question, how are you today? Active listening, for example. Active listening means that you empty yourself and you are ready to accept what the other person says. That's in the spiritual language, it's called kenosis in the Greek. It's emptiness. We know it, we practice it as Christians for thousands of years. And now we have a nice new wording for it, active listening. Trainers do 1 day, 2 day trainings where they teach it and let people know about it. Those people who never heard about it because they don't have a spiritual root, they don't have a spiritual life, and therefore they have to learn it in the age of 30 or 40, something which without speaking about it too much, we do in our little communions, even as children, and it's part of our life, to not just to listen to each other so I can immediately tell my answer and why I'm against your view, but to be open, to have a dialogue. So I think all those things which we call wise, to be wise, these are the virtues we need. And that's why today's social science deals with those terms like trust, like love, like mutuality, mutual love or respect or caring or things like this, active listening, happiness, common good. Because if we want to achieve a better world, it's not based on GDP alone. So I think, again, we have an advantage. I would say as a strategy consultant, we have a competitive advantage because we have a 2,000 year know-how We know all the virtues, we know all the scripts which helps us and tells us what to do. We have the encyclical letters, we have a compendium, we have a full system. We don't have each of us alone figure out what is the right way. We have to adapt all this knowledge, which is still not easy, but there is already an existing knowledge, including the virtues and everything which is related to it. I mean, to be humble, for example. You cannot be a servant leader if you are not humble. So all those aspects we know from our spiritual life can be translated and should be translated into first to management science, so to prove and to show that this is not just an idea, but it's a system, a consistent system, and then into practice. And for example, in my case, I run my own company. So when I started my PhD, it was not because I hoped to get a higher salary if I do my PhD from myself. I did it, and the topic was the integration of business and the Catholic social teaching. So I have the right and the authorization to speak about it, both from an academic point of view as well as from a business point of view. Because until I'm only just a businessman, a nice Christian businessman, that's okay, but we are not part of the academic society. Now I can officially write articles and books and so on, and I have a kind of authorization. In my view, the authorization comes from the Catholic social teaching, but for the outside world, it comes from the fact that now I have a document which says that I am PhD, so I am allowed to speak about it.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, although we have lots of more questions, but I think all of us need a little break before we will go to the panel discussion, which will give an opportunity for our four presenters to integrate somehow these four important topics that we were listening to during these 2 days. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all this that you have explained, because for us Sisters of Social Service, somehow this economical business, for most of us, it is kind of very far away. Some sisters are expert, but the majority not. So it was so wonderful that you brought these ideas closer to us and showed us how spirituality and economical thinking and actually economical enterprise can be integrated. So thank you so much.
And thank you very much for the opportunity, because it was also a challenge for me, and I'm glad if I could contribute to helping in these issues for the future.